What happens when your career is technically working, yet you begin questioning whether it still reflects who you're becoming? In this episode, Ben Stein shares the internal season that preceded his move from executive leadership into purpose-driven coaching. This is the Your Next Success podcast, and I'm your host, Dr. Carolyn Sangal. I am a life-first career coach and strategist on a mission to normalize questioning your career, because I believe each of us is made on purpose for a purpose only we can fulfill. The longer we live out of alignment with who we are, what we do best, and why we are here, the more we miss out, and the more the world misses out on what only we can give. The Your Next Success podcast is where we explore how to build a career that truly fuels your life. We talk about self-discovery, smart job search strategies, professional growth, and you will hear stories from people who have navigated big career transitions themselves, so you can create a life-first career and become your own version of authentic success. My guest today is Ben Stein. Ben is the founder of Purpose Up, where he helps mid and senior level professionals navigate career transitions and land roles aligned with their strengths and values. Before launching Purpose Up, Ben built a successful career in advertising and tech, holding leadership roles, including VP of Product, and leading core cross-functional digital teams. Today, he brings that executive experience into his coaching work, guiding professionals through meaningful pivots with clarity and strategy. Career transitions rarely begin with chaos. Often, they begin with evaluation. In this conversation, Ben shares what was happening internally before his shift from corporate leadership into coaching. We discuss the difference between insight and action, how identity evolves during transition, and what it looks like when seeking matures into service. In this episode, we talk about what seeking feels like inside a functioning career, how identity shifts during professional transitions, why awareness alone does not create change, and how clarity becomes aligned. Now let's welcome Ben to the conversation. Welcome, Ben Stein, to Your Next Success. I am thrilled to have you in this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so as you know, we're going to talk about careers, career transitions. That's also something that's near and dear to your heart. You have helped hundreds of people with their own career transitions. So we'll get to that. Very successful author, successful in so many, author of multiple different books. We will get to all of those things. And I'd love to kind of dial it way back, help the listeners understand, where were you born? Where did you grow up? What was life like for the youngest Ben Stein?
Going all the way back. So I was born in Washington, D.C. and grew up in the D.C. suburbs. And I actually just said goodbye to the house that I grew up in when I moved my parents down here. So we go back there every year. But yeah, youngest of three, dad psychiatrist, mom was a housewife. And so growing up, I was generally a introverted, artistic, sensitive guy, and also just trying to vie for my place in the family because it seemed like my older sisters got the priority. So I was like, all right, I'm on my own here. Um, and yeah, I mean, I had a kind of middle upper class upbringing and lots of advantages that other folks don't have. And then also, some family drama that and trauma that drives everyone with pain and all of that too. So it was a good upbringing that also helped form the healing that I had to do later in life.
Yeah. How much older are your siblings?
So my oldest sister Shauna, who passed a few years ago from pancreatic cancer, she's 8 years older than me, and Julie is 2 years older than me.
I'm so sorry, because pancreatic cancer is one of those ones that, like, by the time you figure out you have it, then they end up saying, like, oh, this is what it is, and it's not looking good.
Yeah, no, it sucks. Um, my sister was very brave and positive through it all. And we were optimistic because she got on a clinical trial for some immunotherapy, and that helped. But ultimately, yeah, it's a doozy, for lack of better words.
Oh, so sorry, so sorry. Okay, but but growing up, you were saying she seemed to have it all together, have the priorities, and so focus was maybe on her and your sister. Wait, two sisters, and then you're the youngest?
Yep,
So how much older is your middle sister?
it's 2 years older. Yeah, ultimately, I think they were like, by the time I came around, it's like, do what you wanted to do. My dad was a psychiatrist, so one of the terms that he talked about in terms of child rearing philosophies was benign neglect, which was perfectly valid to like just let your kid do whatever your kid's gonna do, and they only need so much. And I wasn't abandoned
Interesting.
as a kid, but I
Right,
also
right.
got a lot of free reign. And so as I kind of grew from shy, introverted kid into middle school trying to find my way and my people, I kind of adapted, lost myself a little, and kind of like survival became a cool kid in that transition. And that meant I was kind of running with the crowd that was drinking, smoking pot. And that kind of informed my teenage years where it's probably more rebellious than I was programmed to be, but working to fit in, find my tribe, and survive the middle school, high school years.
Mm. And when did this artistic, sensitive elements start showing? Like in elementary school, did you love art? Did you love drawing? Where did that come into play, and what did it look like?
Yeah, I love drawing. I always loved it. I remember I had a teacher in the sixth grade who had been a cartoonist as a previous career, and he was kind of
Oh,
almost one of my
cool.
heroes. And he would actually like draw these pictures every day because we had a job where certain people were calling for the carpool lines, and he would like draw a picture announcing who that was. And I remember collecting some of them. I thought they were so cool. Uh, but yeah, I loved cartooning and I loved drawing, and that was just kind of where I could find flow. And in addition, me and my sister Julie spent hours and hours playing Legos together when we weren't
Interesting.
watching TV.
Speaking of TV, what kind of shows did you like back then?
So, I mean, I watched so much TV. I mean, it was just like bad 80s sitcoms. Like, and it was everything. I mean,
Did you want a car bed? Like some of those 80s sitcoms, right? Like, was it Kirk Cameron had the car, like the race car bed, right? I'm just saying, like,
yeah, and that reminds me of Silver Spoons with the kid that was really rich.
yeah.
Um, Small Wonder, going back in time. Yeah, so I was born in '78, so I got, the brunt of the '80s with my TV watching.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so school-wise, were there any particular things that you enjoyed during actual school time?
Yeah, I gravitated towards reading and writing. I had some, they weren't necessarily learning disabilities, but I was slow with my motor coordination. So like my handwriting sucks. That was always like a struggle for me. But I was always pretty smart. Although I went to a private school, I got held back in third grade because I started really early. So I kind of like corrected for my age, and that was like a tough adjustment, but then adjusted to that. But no, I liked reading a lot. Math wasn't my favorite. Um, I remember I always, yeah. So math was a struggle. And in high school, physics made math real, so I enjoyed it a bit more, and also had a really good physics teacher then. But yeah, throughout my career, I kind of avoided math where I could, and leaned into reading and writing.
Interesting. And then that going from being one of the youngest in your class to now being one of the oldest in your class, how did that play into this perhaps getting into the wrong crowd and all that? Now you could drive first, right? So how did that come to play?
I just had a flashback. So I had my mom's country squire station wagon, and probably had about 6 or 7 friends packed in it, and we had decided to go down to DC to go see a show at the 9:30 Club. And in DC, there's like traffic circles, and those are some of like the most stressful things for a new driver to navigate multi-lane traffic circles. And like teenage boys are like screaming, and I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't die. And um, but yeah, so it was fun, and I'm honestly lucky I'm still around with some of the bad decisions I made. Um, so I'm fortunate to have come out relatively unscathed from all that.
Were your parents aware of the decisions you were making, or did they just think this is just a moody kid?
They were aware. So yeah, I mean, I remember I got caught in ninth grade smoking pot, right? So, um, my dad would then like give me money to go out, and he's like, "You're not going to buy drugs with us, are you?" And I was like, Dad, I don't want to lie to you. I mean, and just like, yeah, and he would respect that I didn't want to lie to him instead of like really clamping down on me. So, there was never like great repercussions except like one time when I got caught smoking in the house, and then it was like, okay, we're gonna ground you. And that time that I got grounded just for fun, I tried mushrooms for the first time, ate them, and then came home for a family dinner. And I don't recommend that to anybody, but it was quite the experience.
Okay, so high school, this experiencing life is taking all sorts of turns. Did anything shift as far as were you still drawing and reading at that time, or mostly just hanging out with friends and enjoying? And how'd that go?
Yeah, I was into computers, and in middle school, I remember I did a like video editing camp, and I got kind of into animation. So all of those, I was kind of interested in how things moved and bringing art into the digital sphere. And I also found painting in high school, and I went to a artistic high school as well that encouraged the arts. So I still kept up with all of that. And I remember I went to an art camp one summer and really kind of flexed and grew there artistically. I didn't like want to become an artist, but I still kind of found flow and enjoyment and liked being in those places and just kind of being in the zone with all of that.
And as you got to towards the end of high school, how did you decide what you wanted to do beyond that? Like what did you consider or what did you choose?
So I didn't have any ideas about what I wanted to do when I grew up at that point. So the idea was, okay, let's go to a good liberal arts school, and you figure it out once you're there. So let's just get into the best college possible. Um, so I ended up getting into Tufts up in Boston. So I partied a lot in high school, but I also worked hard, and luckily was smart as well. So did relatively well. And I had some family that helped me get into Tufts as well. I probably wouldn't have gotten in without legacy. Um, and actually, my nieces, I think, are like fourth or fifth generation there.
Oh,
So I
wow.
had like
Yeah.
so like my grandfather was an art professor there. My mom grew up on the campus and went there. Great grandfather went to dental school there. And now my nieces are going there, and my brother-in-law is a teacher there. So
Oh,
rich
wow.
rich history with that school. So I ended up studying psychology. I was originally going to start with computer science, and then I started doing those courses, and I was like, my brain does not want to spend time doing these things. This is too hard. So psychology, I was interested in. My dad was a psychiatrist, and I wanted to kind of figure out why I was messed up and what I could do to fix it. And I liked learning about psychology, both from a kind of theory perspective as well as I got into biopsychology a little bit. And then I minored in communications and was fascinated with I took a class on they had the X college at Tufts, the experimental college where you could take weird classes. One of those was a television production class, and I was like, wow, this can actually be a job. Um, and that really got me into the children's television realm where I was like, oh, you could use TV and also kind of use it for good. So that and the psychology were areas of interest that I gravitated towards.
Let me understand this little passing comment of Something about psychology because you wanted to figure out how you were messed up.
Yeah. So I mean, I felt like, growing up, so it was interesting. So I had a dad who was a psychiatrist, but he was pretty detached from what was going on in the house. Like he wasn't that present. And then meanwhile, my mom actually, suffered with depression. So all of that was like a very fascinating combination to kind of grow up with. And so I think growing up, my coping mechanism was to kind of numb with the pain that I was experiencing, both with like the lack of presence of my dad and my mom going through it. So all of that was like tough. So it was kind of like me checking out and kind of dealing with all that. So I kind of felt like um, I probably not until my late 20s where I realized I was emotionally stunted because I hadn't figured out a way to deal with negative emotions like an adult.
Mm.
And so I think, I'd felt, yeah, like I hadn't fully matured as a person or wasn't on like the right track in many ways, even though I was still like on the outside, things were fine.
Yeah. Externally successful, internally, you're starting to feel a little more like, is this a problem or am I the problem?
Yeah, I remember my first college girlfriend, that's where kind of my using marijuana on a regular basis kind of like became something where she's like, "Do you always have to do that?" And I cared for her deeply, and she was like an amazing young woman. And I realized, oh, okay, this is creating friction for somebody I care about. And that was kind of like the first understanding of like, this isn't, I'm not on the ideal path, but I wasn't like ready to get help or address it at that point.
Interesting, interesting. And with your dad having been a psychiatrist, was like mental health of not really like available, but like I mean, I grew up in a household where like anybody who talked about like we had a lot of thoughts, but we didn't have feelings.
Right.
Um, and talking about your feelings or something, oh, that's just a bunch of crazy people, right? So I imagine like when your dad was there, his perspective is different. And but did he help encourage your mental health? And is,
Well, it's
was
a
that
good question.
routine like a dentist appointment, like or not? Because I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, so I remember when I was struggling in fifth grade, like my mom was going through it. I was kind of missing school, calling in sick, and essentially I was kind of faking sick in order to get attention in the house. And that ultimately led to me being sent to a therapist. And yeah, I don't think I have like enough self-awareness from that time to see if that helped or not. It probably did help at some point, but I remember like I hated it and I was like, I don't want to be talking to this guy. Um, so in that regards, they're like, oh, he's going through some stuff. Let's send him to um, therapy. Uh, but outside of that, there wasn't really kind of like much checking in or heart to hearts or things like that.
Interesting. Yeah,
I mean, my
interesting.
mom was kind of like the emotionally intelligent person, even though my dad was a psychiatrist. So if I did needed to confide in someone, my mom had the sensitivity and the wherewithal to kind of be with me, so I wasn't like totally abandoned. But sometimes she had capacity, sometimes she didn't.
Yeah, yeah. And did you know that? Like, did you realize she was depressed? Did you know what that was? Or was it when you were later then finally able to be like, oh, that's what was happening with her?
So I mean, I realized it um, because it was one of those things where you're constantly kind of like disappointed by somebody not showing up, spending time in bed, not being able to deal. And then unfortunately, she went on some pretty hardcore medication in my teen years, which like essentially made, for lack of better words, made her a space cadet. And that like in your angry teenage years, like when your mom is just like not fully there because of heavy medication, that's super frustrating. Um, so that and I think and going back to the psychology point, I also kind of wanted to understand all the dynamics from like my mom as well to kind of like avoid some of those potential
Interesting.
pitfalls for myself in the future.
Yeah. Okay. So you go into psychology and you're wanting to try to like get deeper insight and info into how we think, our thoughts, approaches, all of that. Um, and did you love it? Was it just what did it always stay interesting, or how'd that go?
Yeah, I enjoyed the different schools of psychology, and like I've always been fascinated by how we think and how we behave. Um, and that ultimately stretched into me being totally fascinated by coaching and personal development later on in my 20s.
Yeah.
And what was most fascinating to me was biopsychology and understanding that at a more root level, um, and how chemicals can affect our brain, whether they're um, endogenous or external. Uh, and because I was also curious about the nature of addiction, because by that time I was hopelessly addicted to cigarettes and was drinking like on a pretty regular basis, etc. So I was kind of curious about all of that as well.
And were you interested in when you were still in undergrad? Were you more interested in psychology to learn about yourself and just kind of like your own family, or did you also have that seed or desire to help others too? Because I know it transitioned into a lot of helping others, but had you always had a helping others drive and desire?
Well, when I was in college, the two tracks for psychology were A, you could go the clinical route and think about practicing and helping people. And my point of view was like, I'm too messed up and immature to think about that track. So that doesn't make sense for me now. And then there was the research route, and that
Mhm.
seemed just incredibly boring and tedious to me in terms of living a life of a researcher. So I was like, I don't think these are for me. And in learning about the kind of like television production track, it's like, oh, this is a great place where you get to utilize that creativity and apply it, and also hopefully be able to make money, because I wasn't bullish about like becoming an artist or anything like that. So I tended to think, okay, the psychology will come in handy, but I don't think I'm going to practice it. Let's see what I can do about, making kind of bridging this gap between making money and being in a creative field. And so that's kind of like where I got out of college with.
Did you do any internship or anything during college, or what were some of your first jobs, paying jobs?
Yeah, I did a couple internships in college. So one of them that was funny was I worked at the local CBS affiliate in their news graphic department. And that was
Interesting.
hilarious because that was like one of the most jaded group of human beings. Like if it bleeds, it leads, like creating graphics for, murder, blah, blah, blah. And so that was eye-opening. I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting, but this is not going to be where I'm going to end up. And then the next internship I got was with WGBH in Boston, and they were the PBS affiliate, and they made Arthur, the kid show, out of there. So
Interesting.
that was a fun internship. I got to be the voice of Arthur in email newsletters, and I got to be the person who read through all the submissions for the Arthur Poetry Contest, and which is hilarious. And like kids would send in like poo poo pee pee and swear words and all of that. Um, and I got to learn more about what was involved with production and how it actually worked in the real world.
And so this vein starts to come in. And then as you graduate college, what did you choose to do?
So I was still with my college girlfriend at the time. She uh, was going to become a doctor, so she got a job at the NIH in Bethesda, where I grew up. So I went to kind of back home to live with my parents because I was trying to figure it out. And so it's
Yeah.
kind of like applying to like weird random corporate jobs just to get a job, but I was also looking for jobs in the television field. And this is where I learned kind of like one of the lessons that I teach folks today about the power of networking. Like when I first got introduced to the idea of networking, I'm like, I'm going to get a job on my own accord. Like I went to college, I'm going to put together a resume, and then I'm going to go in there and they're going to like me or not. I'm not going to use nepotism to try and get me a job because
Yeah.
but ultimately, my uncle's neighbor worked at a documentary production company, and I ended up interning with them and then ended up getting hired there. And that was like my first kind of real job. And it was great because it was a documentary production company. And we ended up working on this film, Paperclips. And it was the story of middle school children from Whitwell, Tennessee, who started a Holocaust memorial project. And they collected enough paper clips for all of the 8 million people that were killed in the Holocaust. And it's a story about them learning about it and then becoming teachers to other kids in the area. And this was
Oh, wow.
like miles away from where the KKK had one of its biggest beginnings.
Interesting. Interesting. And and then what happened?
So I really enjoyed working there. And I also realized like going up the production route was hard. I also got this um, part-time gig on ESPN 2's show Sporting Dog Chronicles as an associate producer, where I was in the office helping organize the shoots, and then I got to go out on a couple shoots, and I realized I'm not an in the field guy. I hadn't really gotten the training, but I remember it was this husband and wife team, and I just have this distinct memory of being on set with these German short-haired pointers, which are a breed of hunting dog, and there were some young ones. And the direction I got was go run these guys around to tire them out so they don't bark during filming. And I distinctly remember I had these like big, wide, baggy jeans that were in style at the time, and they were like falling down. So one hand was like holding them up while I was running, the other hand was like holding the leashes of these dogs, and then I'm running them around being like, this is what I went to college for. And then I like turn over my shoulder and like everyone's laughing at me. And I was like, I don't know if this production route's for me.
Interesting. Yeah. I was thinking like, oh, maybe you didn't want to be like, you're still wanting to do the behind the scenes things, kind of more aligned with, being introverted, but no, it's actually baggy jeans, running dogs. Now, had you had dogs growing up?
I hadn't. This was a random assignment, and I really, I mean, fascinating. Like I wasn't a hunter either, but it
Yeah.
was it was a fascinating opportunity. I got to like go out to Arkansas and some other random areas to see these breeders do their thing. New respect for what those dogs do. But yeah, I mean, I like dogs a lot, but I mean, one of the best things was being surrounded by all these like Labrador puppies during one shoot.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so my girlfriend got a job up in New York. Well, she started medical school, and I wanted to move to New York anyway because there's more opportunities in television. I ended up getting a job at BBC Worldwide, and the appeal of that was A, it was more about doing deals, so I didn't have to be out in the
Yeah.
field, and then B, the boss that I worked for worked on children's television deals, so I was like, oh, maybe this will be a good way to kind of continue the children's television thread. So I got that job. And so the first lesson I learned was networking. The second was storytelling. And it wasn't intentional, but my boss told me later that one of the reasons I got the job was because I was describing my previous job where I was sensitive to my boss who was a new parent, and I knew whether to kind of like let him have his space if he had had like a rough night with a kid, or if he was ready to engage or not. And she said like that empathy or understanding really clicked with her. So that was one of the reasons that helped me get the job. And she only told me that afterwards, and that wasn't intentional, but um, storytelling can be important when you're telling the right story to the right person.
Very much so. And even that empathy that you were able to display there, I guess you'd learned that growing up as far as like how's your mom doing? What are you going to do? How are you going to show up based on how she's able to handle the day? And so much of that could correlate to somebody who is a new parent. And now you're way more perceptive than other people about how somebody's showing up and how you can show up accordingly. That's cool. Imagine what your life would be like if your career aligned with who you are, what you do best, and actually fueled the life you want. At Next Success, we support all ages and stages through career transitions, from students exploring majors or careers to job seekers actively searching or reimagining their next move to professionals committed to self-awareness and leadership growth. Stay connected and explore what's possible at nextsuccesscareers.com and follow Next Success Method on LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. And then what happened?
So zooming out from all of this, I then got really bored there. I mean, starting a young life in New York was great. Great that I didn't have a motor vehicle with the amount of drinking that I was doing at the time. So that was helpful for public safety. Um, but I got pretty bored, and my ability to move up um, was pretty limited, and I wanted to get back to being more hands-on and closer to the creativity because the pushing the paperwork wasn't exciting for me. So uh, I actually I forgot to tell you, one of the internships I didn't get in college was at the Jim Henson Company. So I always was a big Jim Henson fan, and I remember getting that letter with Kermit on the um, letterhead and saying I got rejected. It was sad. I'd gotten close, but didn't get it.
Yeah.
So anyways, I remember interviewing for like another job with a Muppet type maker, someone who was in that, and I chose between that and this Noodle Soup Productions, and this was a small animation company, and the role was for kind of a producer slash business development person. So I was trying to help them grow their business on the commercial side with ad agencies, and then produce whatever we work that we got. And it was an amazing experience, being next to all these amazing creatives. And as a producer, I had the opportunity to kind of make more money than an artist, which was important for me. So I was there for a number of years and got up to executive producer, ended up producing some great commercials. Um, and I started doing interactive work there as well. And that's also, so I was there from my mid 20s to my late 20s. And that's also kind of in my personal life where I was going through kind of like the dark night of my soul. And I first decided to get help kind of hitting a couple different rock bottoms along the way. But in that experience, it was nice being close to the work and being in business development and advertising then. It was a great excuse to go to all these free open bar parties. So that was like fun for a while until
Yeah.
it got like pretty empty and soulless. And then I finally realized like, okay, like partying is getting old. I'm getting older. My relationships with women weren't really they were kind of gross in the way that I was treating them, and relationships with friends weren't that great because I wasn't like that present. um, so I kind of things came to a head. So I was always able to like keep work okay, but ultimately there was this like big gaping hole inside my soul and my heart where I was like, I need to change something. And I tried to do it on my own for a while, like listening to Tony Robbins and downloading things via LimeWire, trying to like reprogram myself. And then ultimately, I made the call to get help in my late 20s. That I thought psychiatry was the gold standard. So I first went, that was my first line of defense. And unfortunately, some psychiatrists are there to prescribe medicine. So I was there to like
Yeah.
bare my soul after holding on to like all of this baggage for years. And then within like 15 minutes, he's like, "What do you want prescribed?" And I was like, it was like a gut punch.
Yeah.
Um, and I was one to experiment, so I tried antidepressants, but they just kind of like made me more numb. So I went off them, but I did go into therapy for a few months, and that was cathartic to help get stuff off my chest that I've been holding on to. But it didn't change my behavior. And I went into each session thinking, what's wrong with me this week? So that seemed
Oh,
counterproductive. And then ultimately, an ex-girlfriend gave me the gift of an intro coaching session. Then I did a weekend intensive, and then that turned into a 6 month client side program, which then transitioned into a 2 year apprenticeship to become a coach. And all of that was very transformational for me to give me tools to design my life intentionally, which I hadn't been doing, and
yeah.
also tools for changing my thought process, those negative voices in my head, uh, and dealing with trauma in a surgical way instead of swimming in it, and how to alchemize that with some methodologies that really resonated with me in a way that therapy didn't. And so I was really able to, I landed my first 6 figure job, and I went from the studio side to agency side. And I took over a year off of substances at that point at the challenge of my coach. It was actually 3 months, and I kept it going because it felt great. And I changed my relationship with substances. I still, I mean, there's more of the story there, but it was a great reset for me, and I kind of grew up emotionally in many ways, like going to weddings sober, dating sober, and doing all of that. And that allowed me to grow up a lot. And I just kind of fell in love with being held to a higher standard and playing a bigger game. And so at the end of that 2 year apprenticeship, I was like, well, if I'm going to be a coach, I got to live out a dream. And one of my dreams since I'd studied abroad in Australia in college was to travel the world. So I left my day job, I left the coaching training program, and I backpacked around the world for 8 months. And I started with Kilimanjaro, and I ended with Everest Base Camp,
Wow.
and just had some amazing adventures in between.
And were you in a relationship at that time? Or was this like a fresh restart, all areas?
So it's a good question. At the time, I had met a Australian woman who was she was a doctor as well. I had a thing for doctors, but she was studying in New York, getting an extra master's. She was actually moving back to Australia, and the idea at the time was that I was going to travel some and then move down to Melbourne. And I remember I was in India interviewing jobs at ad agencies in Melbourne, and then I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So I remotely broke up with my girlfriend, and then I mean, there's some funny details about the story. So they're not funny, but I remember it was Valentine's Day, and it was right before I was going to do my Everest Base Camp trek. She was taking some exams, so I didn't want to break up with her before her exams to kind of like create emotional upheaval prior. But I remember I was like, well, so I sent her these like e-cards for Valentine's Day, knowing that I was going to break up with her. And I was like, oh my God, I'm a terrible human being. And then I was doing the Everest Base Camp trek, knowing that I was going to break up with her. So this is like on my mind as I'm like walking for days on end in like the most beautiful nature. And then knowing that I'm going to have to break up with her when I get back. And then I break up with her when I get back over Zoom. And then she's like, well, we have to meet and talk about this. I'm like, really? She's like, yes. I was like, okay, I'll give you that respect. So then she flew to Hong Kong, and we had like a very bizarre breakup weekend. It could have been like a short film in itself. But yes, ultimately, great woman. It just didn't feel right for me to move forward with it.
Yeah,
So we broke it off at that time.
that's interesting. And it's also kind of like, y yeah, like, had you traveled a lot by yourself previously? Because I mean, it's ballsy and it's great, and everything anybody wants is on the other side of their comfort zone. So, like, there was a time a few years ago where I intentionally just kept putting myself in uncomfortable character building experiences. I couldn't quite, leave kids and a husband and go around the world, but still, that's a pretty ballsy move to make, brave and transformational. But, like, what gave you the ugh, to, like, actually you go from the thought that would be cool to the action of, yeah, I think I will do this thing that probably a lot of other people were like, really, leave your job Go around the world. Are you sure? Is that a great idea?
It was one of those things that was on my mind for years. I'm a big Tim Ferriss fan, and he talks about the book Vagabonding by Ralph Potts. And I read that, and it inspired me. And I was like, I want to do that at some point. And I kept thinking about it. And I remember like talking about it with my dad. He's like, "Do you think that that's a good idea?" And, I thought, is this going to be career suicide if I do that? Um, and ultimately, what I loved about the coaching container I was in was it was like, okay, let's design your life. Like, what do you want? And I was like, I do want this. So, and then actually like making it happen, having the accountability. So I think I had gotten accustomed to getting out of my comfort zone, and I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And that was similar to, later on when I had the opportunity to go coach full time after I got let go, and we'll talk about that. But I was like, if I don't do this now in my early 30s, I'm gonna have kids and I'm not gonna be able to get away. So like, let's do this now. And I'd heard a lot of people had done Kilimanjaro, and it's just like one of those things. Like when you feel envy, it's like a signal, like go for it, right? And that was one of those things that I'd like wanted to do. And I remember traveling alone in India was like a traveler's like scary thing, but I was like, if I can do that, it's like if you can be in New
You can do
York, you can make
anything.
it anywhere. It was like if you can travel in India, then you're a traveler, so or a backpacker. So yeah, I kind of wanted to experience that while I could.
And were you in shape?
Yes, I mean, I had completed a couple of marathons by that
Oh,
point.
wow. Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I'd done the New York Marathon in 2010, which was an amazing experience. And I remember walking around New York City with like a backpack and my boots, breaking them in, getting practice. And there's this one Roosevelt Island subway station that had like the biggest staircase. And I remember doing that like up and
Oh,
down for a
wow.
couple hours, training. So yeah, I was training for it.
That's good. So even your pre-character building experience, you were mini character building. Although I've seen that staircase in pictures. One day I'll actually go there, and I don't think that's a mini a mini
Yeah,
character
no,
building, especially with the backpack. Yeah.
it was for real. So yeah, so I was in decent shape for Kilimanjaro, and um, yeah, it was a challenge, but it was beautiful. Really enjoyed it, and yeah, had lots of adventures in between.
Yeah. And then you come back from that, and then yeah, let's catch back up on the and then what'd you do for your job after coming back to that and then getting to the later
So
chapters.
I wasn't fully aligned with the coaching company, and going back to them, I didn't feel fully aligned, and I was scared to become a coach full time at that point. So I went back into ad agency land, and became an executive producer. I remember I worked on the relaunch of GE.com, started freelance and then got hired on. And then I then went to another agency, became a director of project management there, worked with clients like Samsung. And over there, we worked a lot with Johnson and Johnson. But ultimately, I was like, I mean, helping to drive bigger projects, bigger teams. And I was like, okay, but advertising was kind of a grind. Um, and I knew it like wasn't the thing for me, but with the technical projects, there was interesting things to learn, and I liked working with smart people, especially the developers and the creative people. So I liked working in those team environments. Ultimately, one of the tech leads went on to small.com, and he brought me aboard to be a leader in product management. So I had the opportunity to switch from like producing and project management into product management, and kind of thinking about it more like software. And that was a big pivot for me, and I was scared about that. But I was like, worst thing I can do is suck at it and I get fired. But they paid me more money, and it was a good opportunity to learn. So I was like, why not? And so that was at ArtNet, which is a small.com that serves the fine art space. And I knew it wasn't the thing for me. I wasn't like a natural great product manager. I was there for like 4 or 5 years, and it was kind of like golden handcuffs. I knew I wasn't aligned with it, and I wasn't adding the value that I would have liked to there. And it was one of those places, and I hadn't really experienced it before. It was like, okay, when am I going to get fired? Because they weren't bashful about letting go of people, and I knew my time would be up at some point. So I was kind of always looking over my shoulder. So in 2016, I was like, what's my purpose? I need to figure this out. So I started the Purpose Up podcast because I loved podcasting. And I started interviewing people living purpose led lives to inspire others and to kind of get medicine for me. And then I started coaching as a side hustle at that point and getting some business coaching to help business build my business chops. And so I had the best luck with helping people with career transitions because I was trained as a life coach, but I had this great corporate experience to leverage. So
Yeah.
as I started on my coaching career, I was like, okay, do I kind of want to help people who are, you know, abusing substances but not like full-blown addicts, or do I want to help people advance in their career? And ultimately, it kind of shook out that trying to get clients who are struggling with addiction a lot harder than people who are, I want to get a new job. And I had a lot more success with that. So I was kind of like leveraged my project management skills, my advertising skills in terms of picking up branding, copywriting, um, and marketing, and then invested in business coaching to help me learn how to build a practice and get clients and learn sales and all those skills to do that. So I work as a side hustle, and then my first son was born in 2018, and I go on paternity leave. And then I get back and I'm at my computer the second day. Like a lot of my coworkers had got let go previously in a restructure, and I thought I was okay. Turns out they just wanted to give me paternity leave, which was nice of them, um, and give me a stress-free paternity leave. Um, and then the second day back, I get the email from the CEO, like coming to my office, and I'm like, oh, this is not good. Like my heart drops, and I'm like, hearing my footsteps echo through as I go through like the big hallway to the CEO's office, and then, that kind of like out of body experience as I'm getting let go, and I kind of like know what's happening, but you're like processing and everything's in slow motion. Um, so yeah, I got let go, and I was like, okay, that sucks. And so I was working in the Woolworth building in New York, and as I'm leaving, I had my stuff in my hands, and I get a call from this coach. And he's like, hey, you're in, like, you got accepted into this coach accelerator program. Like, literally, as I was leaving the building, and I was like, okay, this is a sign. Because the choice at that time was to go for another safe tech job. They were easier to get in 2018, or um, go for full-time coaching. And I decided, do I want to live by example for my son, or do I want to play it safe? And I was like, let's live by example. And so I made the decision to go for it full time, and haven't looked back since.
Oh, that's awesome. And it was cool that like you explored, and I think this is something that you encourage people to do now and me as well. While you're in that job, even if you're starting to feel like, I don't think this is it, you don't have to just make a rash decision and leave. You can leave by choice or by force. You kind of waited it out a little while, but you were still building up skills, exploring other things while having a little bit of a safety net. And then when that was removed, you were already a few steps ahead of somebody else who like just waits for the dire, like, oh, I guess now I should figure out what I want to do.
And I remember I was working with a purpose coach. I'd received lots of different coaches. One of them was a purpose coach. Her name is Holly Woods, and she's got a couple great books out. One's called The Golden Thread, but she encouraged me to look back at my childhood, what I liked doing, and one of those things was cartooning. And part of me is like, I'm an almost 40-year-old man at this point. Like, why would I do cartooning? But um, I remember drawing about the fear and anxiety of becoming a new parent. And so I started drawing, and then I started writing alongside that. And I ended up making a dad blog called I Hope I Don't Kill It. And it never like blew up or anything, but it was this really fun project where I got to draw and write in this irreverent voice, and tapping back into my creativity was really freeing, and knowing
Yeah.
that I could do projects like that. And that ultimately, when I was in a leadership container another couple years later, they were like, "Oh, what's a stretch goal that you want to do that you wouldn't do otherwise?" And I had had a desire to write a children's book. So having that experience in the dad blog, writing and drawing, empowered me to do this children's book. And so I ended up writing Little Benny Piggy and Courage for the Win, and it's all about feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And I think that that's the key. You know, we talked about getting out of our comfort zone. I think that is the key to finding successes is feeling the fear, because we either run away from it, and that's what I did for years with numbing, with
Yeah.
avoiding, or we can step into it. And you know, even as recently as yesterday, I was chatting with Claude. We were talking about my financial goals and plans this year, and it's ultimately challenging me to raise my prices. I'm like, but no, I don't want to raise my prices. And so, you know, we constantly get to be in this space of challenging ourselves and getting out of our comfort zone.
Absolutely. I get it. I get it. And then you went on after writing that children's book to write something else. What was that?
Yes. So I wrote my first nonfiction book, Purpose Up, Break Free and Find Work That Matters. And it's essentially the book that I wish I had had when I was in my late 20s trying to figure things out. And so it tries to encapsulate a lot of my methodology into a book, um, for people to understand how I approach things, where we understand our vision, we understand how those inner critics can run the show, and how to rewire that. And also, like a big portion, I think, is healing some of those wounds from growing up and reframing them so that we can understand the gift in them. And also, once we kind of get rid of some of those lenses that we grew up with, we can see with clarity where we want to go more. So I think that
Yes.
healing is an important part of the journey. And then from there, we can ask ourselves, and we can be more in touch with our intuition, what does success look like for me as opposed to what I've been programmed for? And we can go on that exploration in terms of skills, you know, the Akagi, where we match up what the world needs with what, you know, we're good at, and our skills, etc. And then from there, what are the practical steps of selling ourselves, networking, connecting with people, building relationships, and how to tell compelling stories to enroll people.
Yes.
And so it covers a lot and tries to introduce a lot of concepts in the way to help people where they're at.
And let's talk a little bit about that. Like when you were growing up, what did you think it meant? Like what did you think success was? What did you think it looked like? Even if you hadn't bought into what your own personal success was going to be or what you wanted to do, but you still had this view of, yeah, the world or what it was could be like if someone was successful. What did you think it was back then?
Yeah. I don't know if I had really thought about success much, to be honest. You know, I think both of my parents came from like a middle class background, and there was almost uh, it was like anti getting too rich or too much money. So it wasn't about like getting all of this stuff. Um, you know, I think so. I didn't really think about what does success look like. I thought about how can I find work that I can have fun with.
Mm,
And that was the first, like for me it was like make money, have fun, learn and grow, and that was my criteria. And then as I grew, ultimately kind of I like what Tony Robbins says about this. It's like there's uh, there's a science to success and you can follow steps, but there's an art to fulfillment. And that fulfillment, you need to figure out what that is for yourself, but ultimately there's a service component to that. So you got to figure out, how am I here to serve others?
yeah.
And that ultimately, like with coaching served me, I was like, I really like this thought process, and a lot of therapy I think is great, and I don't want to discount it, especially coming from my background, and both my sisters became therapists. But ultimately, coaching was a lot more powerful for me, and being able to challenge people, being able to be forward facing, really resonated with me a lot more. And so ultimately, that became this like vehicle to live my best life and serve others in the process.
And so now, how do you define authentic success for you in this moment?
For me, it's, am I being energized? Am I serving? And am I in flow more often than not? So, and also, am I listening to those intuitive nudges about what's next? So for me, those intuitive nudges that make me uncomfortable are around building real community in real life. Um, they're about speaking in public more, and they're about ways to impact people less one-on-one and more one-to-many.
Yeah.
So those are those things that I'm being nudged towards that I'm excited about.
And how do people find you? How do they work with you?
Yeah. So you can check out my website, purposeup.com. I'm also Coach Ben Stein, Stein, on Instagram. So that's another way to find me. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm active there, so you can look up Purpose Up Ben Stein. Yeah, so you can reach out to me via any of those channels, and we can have a quick chat to see if it makes sense. You can also get my book. It's on Amazon, Purpose Up, Break Free, and Find Work That Matters. So there's lots of different ways in, and if you want some free tools, you can check out purposeup.com/gift. And I've got some good job searching tools if you're in the market.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for telling a little bit more of your story. And I just wish you the utmost happiness, success, fulfillment, and all of those things. You do such amazing, beautiful work, and you've helped so, so many people. So thank you so, so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking great questions. Definitely went a lot deeper here on my history, but hopefully folks can resonate with my story. And I appreciate you holding the space.
Ben, thank you for sharing your perspective and the evolution behind your work. I appreciate the way that you articulate transition as a thoughtful process rather than a dramatic event. Your path from seeking to serving offers a grounded framework for professionals navigating their next success. Thanks for listening to Your Next Success with Dr. Carolyn Sangal. Remember, authentic success is yours to define and includes aligning your career to support the life you want.